On air.
On air. All right.
Here we go.
Okay.
On air.
On air. All right.
Here we go.
Okay.
On air. All right. I guess I need headphones. Okay.
Hey, Dan. I think you've got the live stream on YouTube there, streaming in the back in one of your windows. So if you want to mute that, I've just muted your microphone in the meantime. Sorry, everyone. We're having a few technical difficulties to start with. This is the first time we've given this a try. So, Dan, I've just unmuted your microphone. Can you give us a talk and see if it's all working again?
Okay. How's this?
Can you give us a talk and see if it's all working again? Yeah. Have you got the YouTube stream open in the background there, or something?
Yeah. Should I run the YouTube live or the Google Plus live?
Definitely the Google Plus. Close the YouTube one because I'm getting an echo off there. Definitely the Google Plus. Close the.
Okay. I've muted. I've paused the YouTube one.
Okay.
So that should work.
Okay.
So I wonder if I can work if I don't use headphones.
It's better if you do use headphones. I can still hear a pretty big echo.
Okay. All right. Is this okay?
Yep, that's perfect.
Okay.
All right. So thanks for joining me this evening, Dan.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Nice to meet you finally.
Yeah, nice to put a face to the name.
Yeah.
I know we wanted to do this hangout and get a few more people involved, but it's not been quite as easy to set up with other people as we'd anticipated because I wanted to stream this live on YouTube. And for those of you who are watching via YouTube at the moment, I wasn't aware that once you stream to YouTube, you can't invite publicly everybody on Google+. So it seems there's a little bit more learning to do on that side of things. But I hope that everybody is able to follow us on YouTube as much as they want. And if you go to the events page and drop a question in there, then we'll be able to follow questions that people have, and I can ask them to Dan. Alternatively, you can send a tweet to at Dan Bailey Photo and at Dan Carr Photo on Twitter, and I'll keep an eye on those things, and we'll get questions that way as well. So hopefully that is allowing a few people to watch us and see what's going on. So tell everybody where you are at the moment, Dan. I'm not sure everybody knows. You're up in Alaska, aren't you?
Yeah, I live in Anchorage, Alaska, and spring is finally hit. Sun setting these days is about 8:30 this week, and so it's light till 9. Beautiful. We had great snowfall over the weekend. Nice brisk 6 degrees this morning. Actually, no, it was 6 degrees at noon, so it was about 1 this morning. But the days are getting longer, and the snowpack is stabilizing, so the skiing is actually getting good. And,
yeah.
I'm excited for spring.
I know spring. For everybody else that doesn't know, I'm based in British Columbia. I'm in Whistler, so Dan and I are both in mountainous areas, and spring's definitely on its way here as well. I can actually see we've got sunlight shining through the window at the moment on me still, which at 6 o'clock is it feels unusual, but spring's definitely on its way. So how's the shooting been recently? What have you been up to? Do you want to talk us through your latest shoots? Have you been skiing a lot, or what's been going on up there?
My ski season started late. Snow biking has been awesome. So I've been shooting a lot of snow biking, and in fact, since I moved to Alaska, I've been doing more snow biking than skiing. And so we were riding all winter long. The snowpack was pretty dangerous in December, early January. Then we had a lot of rain. Starting to get better. In fact, I'm doing a fly-in week-long backcountry ski trip in the Chugach Mountains at the first week of April. So I'm looking forward to that coming up.
That's cool. And am I right in thinking you actually have your own plane as well?
I do. I have a little Cessna 120 on bush wheels, and I learned to fly as soon as I moved to Alaska. I have my pilot's license for about 4 years now, and I've got about 350 hours total time. And so it's a little plane. It's got a little motor, but it's got enough. I can land on gravel bars and short backcountry strips, and it's a lot of fun. Can't carry a ton of weight, but it's fun.
Yeah, that's cool. So you don't have skis on there. You can't land on glaciers and things like that.
Not yet. I'd really like to get skis at some point. Right now, I use it a lot to go hiking in the summer and exploring, and also I love to go up and shoot Chugach Glacier aerials, mountain
Hmm.
aerials around Anchorage, evening sunsets.
Yeah, I've seen some of your aerial shots of the glaciers before, and they're stunning. It's incredible scenery up there, especially at that point where things start to melt back from the winter time, and you get that transition. There's a lot, you can see a lot of the ice. That looks fantastic in the summertime.
Yeah, the blue ice is really incredible to see. And this weekend, we actually rode our bikes out along one of the frozen rivers. It's still cold enough, you can ride on the rivers and the gravel bars. And we rode out to the Knik Glacier, and we rode around the lagoon full of icebergs and just pedaling around on our fat tire bikes around all
Hmm.
these huge blue ice formations. Basically right up against the glacier.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, you've been shooting a lot of this snow biking or fat tire biking. It seems to be quite a trend that's taking off at the moment. And have you found that that's given you some new clients in different areas to work with, or um, do you
I,
think it's still in its infancy and it's going to grow a little bit more?
I think a little bit of both. It started up here. Fat tire biking kind of started up here. These guys brought beach bikes up here to ride on the snow, and so uh, it started out was guys sewing up, welding two rims together and stitching, wide tires on those double rims and then modifying frames. And then you started to get the bigger rims and the fatter tires, and now the bike manufacturers are making these bikes especially, to fit these big tires, these 4-inch wide tires, 100 millimeter rims. And there's two manufacturers in Anchorage. There's Fatback and 907, and I know the guys at both those bike shops, and I've been shooting a lot of photos up here. But it is in its infancy, and so the Alaska fat bike culture is getting some notoriety, and the fat biking is getting more popular out in the lower 48 and in Canada.
Mhm.
So I do see it as a real emerging market for myself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I noticed I was down in Seattle recently, and I saw there was a whole store dedicated to fat tire biking down there. And I've seen a few frames popping up here in Whistler as well. So it does seem to be something that's growing quite rapidly. And for people like you and me, we just want to get out in the mountains, right? We want to go as far as we can. We want to get out, as far away from human habitation as possible, because that's, I don't know about you, but for me, that's when I start kind of feeling at home, and that's where a lot of my photography, I guess, inspiration comes from just being out there in the wilderness. So if there's another mode of transport to get me out there, especially one that doesn't use fuel and isn't so expensive as snowmobiling, helicopters, and things like that, that's pretty cool. I would definitely like to see what it's all about. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It really does get you out there. The airplane's a lot of fun, but it takes a lot of time, it's maintenance, and you got gas costs. The fat tire bike, get out and you can just go take off and cruise on the snow machine trails, on the frozen rivers. There's actually more winter riding up here in the Anchorage area, and probably Alaska in general, I would say. There's
Hmm.
much more winter riding opportunities than there is summer mountain biking opportunities up here.
Right. Yeah, I
There's,
guess
like
that.
I said, you can ride on frozen rivers and swamps. That's pretty much a huge part of the state.
Hmm. That's cool. We have a question on the events page on Google Plus here. Mitch Wood is asking, what is your bare bones camera gear on one of your adventures during winter versus during summer? So I'll let you answer that first, and then I'll have an answer for that one as well.
Okay, my main body that I'm running right now is still the Nikon D700, and it's I can't bring myself to upgrade because it still works great and it does what I need to do, and my clients are still happy with my imagery. So I use the D700. Uh, my favorite, usually if I leave the house, I never go without my Nikon 24 millimeter, my old AF or my old autofocus D lens,
Hmm.
which I've had for probably 15 years. If I want to go really light, then I might take the 85 1.8 as well. Lately, though, I've got the brand new Nikon 70 to 200 f4, the brand new VR.
Yes, I bet that's been a lens that Nikon shooters, especially people that need to travel light, have been really waiting for a long time. So that was cool when they announced that.
Yeah, that's been a really cool lens to have. I've had it for about a month, and it's so much lighter than my old 80 to 200 2.8. And
Hmm.
so, I that's what I took out to the Knik Glacier on our biking this weekend. And it's light enough that I was actually finding myself able to ride with the hand on the handlebar and hold the lens up with the camera with that new 70 to 200 and shoot one-handed while I'm riding. It's that light, it's so much more manageable.
Yeah. So
So my
the VR's good on that as well. Is it three stops or what are they calling it? Three or four
Nikon's
stops?
calling it 5.
Oh,
I,
five.
I don't know how to accurately gauge that.
Mm.
I just know that for me, it's produced some really tack sharp photos recently.
Hmm. So you find with a 70 to 200 and your 24 prime, you covering a lot of bases there. You can get most things done with that if you want a lightweight setup.
I do, and I love the long range, and so that 7200 gets me out there. And then I love wide angle, so I can live without that medium range.
Hmm.
I love my 50. I'll take that sometimes, but if I'm going light and fast, I can live without that middle range. And these days I'm carrying a little compact camera. I've got the Fuji X10, and
Hmm.
so that if I need that middle range, I've got that in there too. And this weekend I literally rode with my Fuji around my neck or slung around my shoulder, and then my Nikon slung around the other shoulder, riding and shooting, with both cameras when I had the chance. So
Yeah, that's it's interesting actually because I have if I was taking a lightweight setup, I'm a Canon shooter, but I end up with a pretty similar setup. I used to have a 70 to 200 f4, and for the same reasons, I switched to that from the 2.8 to save a lot of weight, and then Canon came out with the 70 to 300 about 18 months ago, I think, maybe 2 years now. And it's kind of a little stumpy lens, but it's an L series. It's got image stabilization, and it's equally tack sharp. And you've got an extra 100 mil range on that. So if I'm going lightweight, I take two lenses, take the 70 to 300, and I also take a 24 mil prime, the 24 f1.4 version 2, and that's probably my favorite Canon lens of all time. So I tend to find a similar thing. I've either got the long range stuff, and especially out in the mountains where you want to bring some of that background scenery and really enhance the size of the mountains and things like that, then using a longer range from between sort of about 150 up to 300 millimeters is great for really just enhancing the size of the background behind an athlete or whatever the foreground feature is. And
yeah,
then there's always the wide angle, as adventure sports photographers, action sports photographers, we're always trying to get in close as well to get that super wide angle shot, the really detailed shot of an athlete. And I find the same thing. I rarely use anything in the middle of that. I don't really miss a 50 mil lens when I'm out there. Sometimes I might wish for a bit wider than a 24. And if I've got easy access to something, I'll take a wide zoom like a 16 to 35 as well. But if I'm going light, those are the two lenses, a 70 to 300 and a 24 mil prime. So that's interesting. We both end up with a kind of a similar combination there.
yeah, and I think there's a reason for that. As adventure photographers, like you said, we like to either be in the middle of the action, getting up close, showing the flying dust and the flying dirt and the flying snow, and just getting a real intimate feel of whatever's going on. Like I said, getting right in the middle of the action, or you're showing an athlete or a person, in against the majesty of this amazing backgrounds. And so with a longer lens, you can really bring that up and accentuate those impressive backgrounds and make them even more amazing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think Mitch was also asking if there was a difference between what we might take in the winter versus the summer. And I think for me personally, I would have to say there isn't really any difference. Um,
I would say that's the same for me. The only difference is in my clothing. It's the camera gear for me is consistent because I'm still striving for the same type of imagery. My style still depends on that fundamental gear I'm using. So to answer that question, I agree with you. My summer and wear kit are not gear specific.
Yeah, exactly. And
Certain trips or certain shoots might dictate whether I bring a certain a different lens or maybe a second body.
mhm.
But for the most part, yeah, going light and fast in the mountains, same summer winter.
Yeah, I think for for certain trips, I've been up to Alaska and shot heli skiing stuff up there, and in those situations where you have something to move you around and you're not concerned about the lightweight nature of everything, then I'm certainly packing either a 300 or up to a 500 mil prime lens for that. But then even in those situations, it's really only that one extra lens. I still have the 24, and I still have that zoom in the middle there, the 70 to 200 or 70 to 300. So, as you say, the basic way that we shoot is the same thing. If you're up in the mountains and you're shooting these kind of adventure things, you're either trying to show the scenery or you're trying to show the action, and those are really covered by the same lens, no matter what the season is. So, yeah. Another question which springs to mind, which I get all the time, and you've probably had this quite a lot as well, being up in Alaska. People are always curious to know if there's anything special that you do with your equipment when you're out in the snow or in the cold. For me personally, I don't tend to do anything special, but I just wondered if you had any tips that you found helpful on that regard as well.
The main thing, that the winter photography is awesome, but there's just a couple things that are definite factors. Number one is batteries. You have to deal with batteries. Batteries get sluggish in the cold. Fortunately, the latest DSLR batteries, the lithium ions, are pretty rugged, and I find myself shooting down to 10, 20 below and really don't have a problem. The smaller cameras that have smaller batteries and compact cameras, batteries definitely die when you get colder. So I always keep a spare, at least one spare in my pocket, in my inner clothing pocket. The second thing is condensation. You don't want to take a cold camera inside a hut or inside, any kind of, even stick it inside a warm jacket for a long time, because it's going to condense, and then you're going to go back outside and you'll have frozen condensation on your camera, and you have to wait till it dries completely. So that if you're going inside during the wintertime, you just want to keep your camera outside, or else keep it in the bag where all that cold air is surrounding it, and don't open the bag when you're inside, unless you're going to stay in for the long haul. And the third thing is just keeping snow off the lens. We were biking this weekend. We're biking on glacial ice and basically a frozen lake with an inch covering snow on it. We were falling down quite a bit, and cameras around my neck. I'm falling in the snow. I fall skiing, and so snow gets on my lens. And so I try to carry, at the very least, a cotton cloth like a bandana, because your polypropylene and capilene shirts do a horrible job of cleaning water off of glass and lens. So a cotton bandana does a better job. A dedicated, chamois lens cloth is going to do a much better job of keeping water off the lens, because you don't want to have, you've got your $1,000 lens, your $500 lens. You don't want to be shooting through a pool of water on the front of the glass.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, there's some good tips there for sure. Now, if people want to see some more of your work, Dan, you have a new book out with light stalking at the moment, don't you?
I do. Light Stalking is an Australian website that's geared towards photography, and they worked with me to do this book, and it's called Behind the Action, and it's a behind the scenes look at how I created 12 very specific images. And the best way that I can describe the book is it's bringing the reader along with me on the photo shoots to get these 12 images, and they get to look over my shoulder and see everything involved, from location scouting, coming up with an initial concept for what I want to shoot, gauging the light on the location, choosing the gear I need, and then kind of defining an approach of how I plan to shoot this subject in these conditions, and then the actual execution. What happened, what actually went down despite my best efforts, how the situation changed, or how I dealt with any number of variables that can happen and change your best laid plans. And then final tips and thoughts. What did I learn from this shoot, and what tips can I take away for next time for a similar situation? And there are 12 images in the book, and they really range from, I tried to make it have a real broad appeal, so they range from action, adventure sports, like there's a couple rock climbing pictures in there. There's some mountain biking and snow biking. There's even environmental portraits. There's a landscape. So it's called Behind the Action, but it's a real wide selection of adventure and outdoor photography styles. And, the idea is it's like a workshop in a book. I obviously can't bring everybody along to look over my shoulder, and I don't usually have an assistant. So this is the best way I can think of to learn from me and learn the techniques that I've been using for years. The same techniques that I'll use when I'm shooting for a pro client, and really the same techniques that have gotten me that pro work. Creating imagery that has, allowed me to market myself to these clients that have ended up using my work and giving me assignments over the years. So I'm really excited about the information that I share in the book.
Whereabouts can people find some more information online? It's at lightstalking.com, is it? And then whereabouts from there?
There's a link right on our Google Plus page for this event. You can also go to my blog, which is danbaileyphoto.com/blog. And that's the most direct way you're going to find the book.
Okay.
And so, yeah, danbaileyphoto.com/blog. And there's actually, we're running a special right now that's introductory price. Right now, you can get 20% off the book with a discount code that's on my site. And the deal is going to run for 48 more hours, and then it's going to end. So.
Okay, cool. It's nice to be able to. So often you go on a shoot and you end up with just one image from maybe what could be a whole day's work, or sometimes even longer than that, from conceptualizing the image with the client and running through all the times when the weather didn't cooperate, or the athlete, well, not that the athlete wouldn't cooperate, but got it wrong. It depends what you're shooting, but I've had many experiences where an athlete might fall when they're trying to do something, and it's nice to be able to, for you to be able to walk people through the whole process to get that one image in the end of it.
Yeah, and one thing that I include in the book, in addition to the one final image that we create, I include a bunch of the outtakes to show that creating a really final image is a process, and there's a lot of pictures along the way that happen as you're working your way towards towards that final shot. Because when you're on location, you don't know what's going to happen. You have an idea, and you start to use your skills, and you kind of navigate your way through all of the environmental and weather and people concerns and anything that else comes along. And you shoot a lot of photos, and eventually you get a great one. And so I think that there's a lot of value in being able to see the outtakes of a successful photo shoot and see how the shoot progressed. I think I've certainly learned a lot from books and websites and things that show that, and workshops that show that process, and they illustrate that creating a great image, most of the time it doesn't just happen as you're flying through life. You can pull it out pretty quickly, but it still takes a combination of your skills, your vision, and methods. And that's a real strength of the book, is it's across that you develop these methods that you can apply in each situation, and you can recognize, okay, I'm going to go to this method here, and then you see it through.
Yeah, I think people have asked before to me, what makes a professional photographer, and one of the things that I say is, yeah, you've probably had this question before, right?
I've got a good answer, but go ahead.
Personally, I don't think these days there's a lot of people out there who are doing fantastic photography work, and they're not necessarily earning 100% of their income from photography. They might be earning a good proportion of it. But one of the things that I always say when I get this question is a professional photographer is someone that will always get the image, no matter what the situation. They're always going to come away with an A-grade shot. Doesn't matter what curveballs the weather throws at you, or any other natural element. So I often find, probably more often than not, that you set out on some sort of assignment, and you set out there and you maybe have something in mind, and it very rarely comes 100% how you imagine before you get out there. There's always something thrown at you. So being able to respond to these curveballs and still put all these little skills that you've learned from one area or another, and from one experience and another experience, put them all together and come away with a shot that is, you know, an A-grade shot for your client. That to me is what makes a professional photographer.
I think you're right on there. I would say the same thing, and I would add this one thing. I was on a shoot recently, and it wasn't going well, and I was lighting gear involved, and I just, you know, I'm confident with my abilities, but sometimes it just doesn't work for you, and you know, whatever variables are just flying around, and you're just not feeling like it's coming together, but you still get it done, and you just keep hustling keep trying new things, and you maintain a level of professional composure and good-natured humor, and you get it done. And so after that shoot, I was like, oh, the definition of a pro photographer is someone who can pull it out of their ass when no one's paying any attention, when the client's not looking.
Yeah, it's definitely an important thing. And as I said, I've met more and more people these days who they actually do other things as well as photography. You know, they still hold a big list of clients in a particular area, though. And as long as they're bringing the photos at the end of it, then I think these days, professional photographer is really anyone that can get the job done, not necessarily making 100% of their income from photography.
I agree. It's in the end, the image matters to the client.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the process of creating that image, you know, it really helps to be someone who is easy to work with and who has a professional and easygoing demeanor, so that the client feels comfortable with. But in the end, the image matters. It doesn't matter what happens, who you are, who's the big name you are or small name. If you deliver final images that make the client happy, then that's the bottom line.
Yeah, definitely. So that's cool to see these 12 photos in your book there. I'm just having a quick scan through the book right now. And you've got there's running, there's skiing, there's some climbing, mountain biking. You've got some fat tire biking in there as well, which is cool. So if anyone's wondering what the heck it was we were talking about earlier when we were talking fat tire biking, there's some samples in there. And you know, just to touch on the learning process as well, which I think is something that's changing these days. I did a seminar this weekend in Vancouver where I talked a little bit about the learning process from the point of view of my background in photography. And for those that don't know, I had a completely different life before I started doing photography. I was doing engineering, and I just decided almost accidentally that I was going to become a photographer. And I never did any kind of formal training or education in photography. I basically learned everything off the internet. And that was about 7 or 8 years ago, and back then there was a lot less information on the internet. And I got to say that back then there was a better percentage of good information on the internet as well. It was reasonably easy. If you wanted to learn something, you could figure out what you needed to. You could find great information on it. And I think that is unfortunately getting a little bit harder these days. There's just so much out there. You know, you Google a particular photography topic, and it can be kind of hard to track down what might be a good tutorial or something like that. So in the world of self-publishing these days, being able to go to a site like Lightstalking and find these ebooks where the information is concisely presented by somebody that you know is a professional in their field, you know, someone whose information you can trust. It's pretty cool to make things as simple as that these days. And I've been reading a lot of ebooks recently from a number of different companies, and it seems like this is a bit of a wave that's happening, and I think it's a really good thing for everyone that's trying to learn a particular niche of photography. What do you think about that kind of thing?
You know, Dan, I'm really excited about the self-publishing possibilities that anyone can do. And this Behind the Action book is actually my 4th feature ebook. It's the first one I did with Lightstalking, but I wrote and published 3 before that. My first one was How to Be a Pro Photographer, which was basically after years of people asking me, you know, what does it take to become a pro? You know, can I buy you lunch and pick your brain? And I finally decided, well, here you go. Here's all the stuff that I would tell you if you bought me lunch and you picked my brain. So, and then I did a creative, it's called Making the Image, and it's creative compositional techniques and basically my thoughts on human vision and color and composition and how to create compelling photographs. And then the third one was called Going Fast with Light. It's all about using flash in the outdoors in the context of going fast, with going fast and light with gear. So a lot of times I'll take a single speed light, maybe two, and a very small lighting modifier, and it can make a huge difference in whether you get a great image or not, because sometimes the light outside just does not cooperate. So this was putting down all the methods and ideas that I've discovered about how to deal with and use flash, and like I said, I'm really excited about the possibilities of self-publishing, because it's allowed someone like me I've been a full-time pro for 16 years, and I've taught workshops, and I've written tons of articles about photography online, and this allows me to reach a really wide selection of audience and put forward a very concise package of basically workshops in a book. Because the reality is that not everybody's going to be able to attend my workshops or come learn from me, and the costs and realities of putting out a paper book, a print book, are just it's a whole different beast. So this allows me to get information out that I feel has helped me, and then I'm happy to share it with and in reality is that it adds to my it's a whole new sector of my business. The teaching has always been a small thing, but a small part. I've always done workshops, but now there's an enormous audience of people online. There's millions of people out there who want to learn how to take better pictures and who love outdoor photography. And I feel that I have a style of teaching and a style of shooting that appeals to a lot of people. And I think the way that anybody, whether it's you or me or anybody else who's writing a book, put yourself out there with your style, and if it resonates with somebody, then they'll be open to learning what you have to offer them.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how I see it. I think we're only scratching the surface of what people can do with e-publishing.
Yeah, and just jumping back to your Going Fast with Light book, which I've taken a look at myself, and it's made me think about the question we had earlier about your gear selection when you are traveling light. So just to top off your 70-200 and your 24mm prime, if you're going to a situation where you think you want to take a strobe with you, what's your lightweight strobist kit for your adventure missions as well?
I'll take along. So this weekend on the Glacier bike, I took the 24, the 70-200, and then I took one SB800 flash, and then I had a sync cord, just a Nikon 3-foot sync cord that weighs next to nothing, crammed in the top lid of my pack, and then I have this tiny little lighting modifier made by LumiQuest called the Softbox 3,
mm-hmm.
and it's just it's smaller than, it's about the size of a laptop screen, maybe a little smaller, but it puts out a great, it's 20 times the size of the flash head, so it puts out that much more diffusion and softens the light. And I use that a lot for close-up head and shoulder shots of environmental portraits when I'm out in the world. That one small box does a great thing. If I want to get a little bit bigger light, then I'll take something like the PhotoFlex Octodome, the little 18-inch one, the small one. I think it's the NXT extra small.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes up a little more room in my pack, but it's really very light, and it requires an extra speed ring and a clamp. But it's still pretty light. Considering 10, 15 years ago, there weren't these tiny soft boxes around. They were, big soft boxes. Nobody took them outside because they just weren't too heavy and too cumbersome, and they just weren't very practical. So I've found a number of modifiers that work really well, and there's a ton of them out there. The ones that I mentioned, they're only, two of, a lot of possibilities. So.
Yeah, I think the LumiQuest one that you mentioned is pretty cool. I've used that one as well. And I like the way that it packs down really flat. I found
it folds totally flat. In fact, I can get it right now. So this is it.
Yeah.
and it folds totally flat. It's just made of plastic, and it pops up and attaches to your flash, like so. And it puts out, you know, a pretty nice soft blast of light when you get close up to a person. And it packs so small, I can just shove it in my handlebar bag or my backpack, or weighs next to nothing.
It fits really well if if you're out in the mountains somewhere doing some sort of adventure photography. You've likely got a bag that has a little slot for a camelback or something like that, or maybe it's got a laptop sleeve. And that's what I like about the LumaQuest one is you can basically slide it in the back of any decent backpack. Will have a little place for you to fit that, because it really doesn't take up. I've actually I don't have one at the moment, but when I did have one, I'd routinely forget it was even in the bag. And until you needed it, and then you just remember, it's in the camelback pocket in the back. So that's a really cool little piece of kit for sure.
You know, and really, that's just that you're really limited by your creativity. I've seen some really ingenious lighting modifiers. I saw probably the lightest most creative thing I saw was on David Hobby's Strobus site, where he used basically a plastic Safeway shopping bag, as a lighting modifier. I mean, it's just you probably, I carry my lunch out into the field in those things. I always have one extra one kicking around my top lid. So I've seen him tape those to the flashes, or use pillowcases, or pretty much anything that is semi-translucent and white in color, piece of paper. So with flash stuff, a lot of it is a lot of it is all about your creativity, ingenuity, but experience on knowing how to use it and what's going to happen when you use this or use that setting.
Mm-hmm. And are you using any kind of remote triggers? You mentioned a short sync cord. Are you just using the sync cord there to get the flash off the camera, or are you using pocket wizards or any kind of trigger like that?
I do use a variety of sync cords. The easiest, least expensive, and lightest and error-free method is still that sync cord, a 3-foot sync cord. It's the only way it's not going to work is if you cut the cord, or smash the contacts. And that's an easy way to get the flash right off the camera. And you can hold the camera here, hold the flash in your other hand, sync cord, I usually stick it behind my head, and then hold it out in the other hand with the flash. But I've also used pocket wizards as well, and those, the plus, I use the plus 2s, although the brand new plus X radios are out, and those look awesome. Mm-hmm. And I've got a PhotoFlex trigger that I use sometimes. So just a real variety of. Oh, and the Nikon SU800 wireless commander is a really great thing. It's better for inside because it works in infrared, but it's worked outside as well. And even another simple way is I'll use the pop-up flash on my D700 to trigger remote flashes, and that works pretty well too.
Yeah, and there's quite a bit of information about that kind of stuff in your Going Fast with Light book, isn't there? And that one's on your blog as well?
That's on my blog as well, and there's all that book has all the information. It starts with gear, flash gear, lighting modifiers, triggers, all the different methods of triggering, pros and cons of different methods, and then I go into I present. Flash intimidates a lot of people, and so in writing the book, I came up with a very simple workflow and checklist for how to use flash in the outdoors. And so it has that workflow, and then I go into talking about adding a second light, using gels and adding some different color qualities to light, and when you want to do that, how to make it look feasible, and then a lot of case studies in there and example photos. So I was pretty excited when I wrote that book. It was I've had that one out for about 1.5 years now, mm-hmm. and it's sold really well. And I've had a lot of great feedback. People said it's broken down flash in a very understandable, simple way. And that's not to take anything away from guys like David Hobby, I've learned a ton from him as well. But I like to think that I've kind of distilled everything I've learned from him, McNally, and all these other guys, and distill into an outdoor adventure style where you're outside in the elements, mm-hmm. and maybe not in as kind of quiet and controlled environments as some photographers do.
Yeah, I think you made an important point when I asked you about the flash triggers, and that is the reliability of a simple sync cord. It
You can't beat it.
you just can't, and for the same reason, I always have sync cords as well, because more often than not, unfortunately, you get out there onto your location, and despite what the specifications of any kind of radio trigger might tell you, that there's a 1 kilometer, 2 kilometer range without line of sight. You can get up in the mountains, and I don't know what it is, whether it's the snow or whether it's things bouncing around, but I can be 50 feet away, line of sight with something, and a simple radio trigger just suddenly stops working. So
Yeah, or your batteries die, or something, you forgot your little tiny connector cord, or who knows what.
yeah,
And that's why having multiple ways of triggering things. And I've been on assignments, I've been on shoots where everything goes wrong. Oh, the battery just died in my trigger. Oh, well now, okay, well I'll use this. Oh, I've left the cable at home, right? The cable's in my other pack. Okay, well now I'll use wireless. I'll use the optical slave mode. Where you're triggering one flash from another flash. A lot of higher end flashes, and even some of the more economical manual only flashes, like the Nissan flashes.
mm-hmm.
Most of those have a photo eye that'll allow it to be triggered with another flash. And so I've used that optical slave mode in a number of different situations.
Yeah, when I started getting into the whole Strobist thing, and my budget was limited. I had one pair of Pocket Wizards. I had one Canon flash, and so I could trigger the Canon flash with the Pocket Wizards. And when I wanted to expand my lighting setup, I just went on eBay, and even though I'm a Canon shooter, I found that the Nikon speedlights are actually so much better than the Canon ones. And I purchased, I think it was 4 or 5 Nikon SB80DXs, and they all have the little eye on them. So to keep my costs down, I had the Pocket Wizard would fire the Canon flash, and then that flash from the Canon would just trigger all of these cheap SB80s that I got, and they have a great flash speed on them. It's about 1,000th of a second at full power, so they're great for action photography. And that way, I didn't actually need to invest in 6 Pocket Wizards to get everything firing. It was a really good solution. I think those Nikon flashes cost me about anywhere between $60 and $80 each, depending on what sort of condition they were in. And at that price, they're somewhat disposable as well. So if you get into trouble, someone ends up riding over your flash, then it's not too much of a disaster. So a lot of times people do get hung up on these radio triggers, and there are some much simpler ways, the optical slaves and sync cables, which get around a lot of the pricing issues. And it's pretty important to be aware of that as well, because you can't always afford to drop in on $2,000 worth of lighting when you first start up. So
no, we're not all Dave Black.
Yeah, Dave's on another level. Go ahead.
Yeah, Dave Black, he's got some pretty cool stuff online. He's a sports photographer in Colorado. He's got this octo rig where he's got 8 SB Nikon 900s on 2 4-square plates that are staggered. So he's got a ring of 8 SB 900s, all with radio popper triggers, and then he has it on a light stand that his assistant holds. So it's like his $4,000 or $5,000 light stand that his poor unsuspecting assistant is sitting there holding. But he's able to get some really cool effects. So, yeah. But that's another level. That method would never work for the way I shoot. And so having one flash that I can trigger with a sync cord, or and that's really the key to photography, whether it's flash or whether it's lenses or camera bodies, whether it's DSLRs or mirrorless or compacts, any of this stuff, camera packs. It's all about figuring out a system that works for you and your own style, because everybody's style is different. Dan, you and I sound like we're pretty similar, but each of us have probably things that the other guy doesn't use or uses more often. And so everybody has their own style of shooting, their own things they like to do, their own modes of transportation, their own their own activities they like to do. And so figuring out your own style that works for you is really key, and not, you don't want to get caught up into thinking that, oh, well, he uses that thing, so I got to use that.
Hmm.
Well, that works if what you do is similar to what I do, and then you can adapt that. Maybe you'll take something out that, maybe you find that a method I use works for you, but then in the process you'll figure out a different way to use it, or leave something else behind and add in something else incorporated into your setup.
Hmm. And the other important thing there is, whilst it sounds we do, reasonably similar work, and it sounds like we have similar styles in terms of the equipment we use. I guarantee you, if we both sat down with one flash, the same camera, the same lens, and the same subject, we would get completely different photos.
Yeah.
And that's what's important as well, to develop your own style. That's just something that comes with time. Yeah, it's funny how that kind of thing just works its way out, and you'll end up with your own very specific style on the way that you use that equipment that's given to you.
It
So,
does. But that said, not knowing exactly where to start, it really does help to find some style matches with you, what you want to do, what kind of photography appeals to you, and learn from them and learn from their methods.
hmm.
And then, like I said, along the way, you'll start to diverge on a path that becomes all your own.
Yeah. So we got a few questions come through on Google Plus here, which we've only got a few minutes left here. So let's just run through these quickly. Thomas Becker has asked, what would your advice be for a starting freelance photographer? How to start contacting magazines and get out of the crowd? So I'll just jump right in and give an answer to that one, Dan. And if you got something to add, then definitely let's hear your thoughts as well. But talking to Thomas, I think in terms of contacting the magazines, one thing that I always say to people is, if you're contacting magazines in a niche market, and some small segment of adventure photography could definitely be classed as a niche market. I do a lot of skiing stuff, and there's not an enormous number of ski magazines, so you're dealing with a fairly limited number of editors. And one of the important things is, I think, is first impressions. You want to make sure that, it's fairly easy to reach out to these editors. Their email addresses are more often than not printed right in the magazine when you pick it up off the shelf. But when you do reach out to them, just have it in the back of your mind that this is your first impression, and make sure that you really are showing them your absolute best portfolio, so that they sit up and take notice, basically. I mean, these guys get a lot of photos come across their email inboxes, and when you're giving them that first point of contact with your photography business, you want to make sure that you really do shine. So I really say to people, make sure that you have your portfolio dialed before you're making that first point of contact, because you don't want to get lost in the noise amongst all the other things that people are sending them. So dialing in that portfolio is definitely important, and make sure you run it past some other people before. If you've got a website with your portfolio on, don't just show it to your mom and your best friend. Get some other people out there. Seek some professional opinions as well. People send me stuff all the time, and I'm quite happy to answer their questions about their portfolio. So first impressions, especially in a niche market, is really important. What do you think, Dan?
I think that's important. When I think back to my magazine work, I think it boils down to three things. The first is first impressions. You only get one chance to have first impression, and so sending your best work. The second is a lasting impression. That first impression goes a long way, but then it's over. You want to keep that relationship going, keep that impressions going, so that over the long run they say, oh, well, hey, this guy, we've seen his work before. Oh, hey, we got another card from Thomas Becker. Oh, we got another email from this guy today. Over the course of the long haul, they will start to recognize that, well, this guy produces consistent work. He's constantly on the move. He's shooting work regularly. We like his work, and marketing is all about making multiple impressions over time. And I've gone years sending clients promo cards and emails and mailers, and then they finally give you a call. So first impressions, lasting impressions, and then it's if possible forming a relationship with the editors. Because the editors are people. They're a lot of the times they're kind of our age, or whatever kind of this nebulous age that we are, sort of youngish, people, and they're just people, and people respond to relationships, and when it comes down to getting the job, a magazine editor is going to hire somebody that they're comfortable, they've possibly worked with before, that they know, that they like hanging out with, that maybe they like having a beer with them. And, there's nothing in my mind that's going to take the place of a photographer who can do the work but has a solid personal relationship. And that's not to say that new blood can't break in, because, there could be a time where the skiing magazine's trying to get a hold of Dan Carr and he's off somewhere else. And they're like, well, okay, we need this shot. Okay, let's call this guy. This other guy, he's sending us mailings. We know he can do good work. Let's give him a shot. There's always going to be room for new blood, because the established guys can't be everywhere all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. The relationships thing, making these relationships is a really good point, because, as you say, if the editor's got 2-3 guys on the table, he knows they're all awesome photographers, but he's going to pick the guy that he wants to spend 2 weeks in Alaska with and have a good time, because editors are people too. They just want to have fun when they're working. So that's a really important factor. And making a physical, personal connection is important if you can do it, and not just relying on email. Definitely. I mean, the next step is pick up the phone.
Face-to-face goes a long way.
And then face-to-face after that, yeah. So that was a good question, Thomas. And I think that's some good stuff from Dan there. So we've got a question from David Nichols here. What's the best advice that you have ever been given? So I guess thinking back to when you were starting out, Dan, is there a piece of advice that sticks in your mind that somebody else passed on to you?
The thing that does stick with me, I've been a photographer. I've been pro for 16 years, but I started shooting in 1990. So I've been a photographer for over 23 years or whatever it is now. Yeah, February 1990. So, and when I was just a few years out before I turned pro, I was able to join. I did a workshop trek with Galen Rowell in northern Nepal, and that was kind of my life-changing event of my young adulthood. And so it was basically a workshop trek with Galen, who was pretty much the father of modern day adventure photography. He pretty much paved the way for all of us, all of us punks. And one day I asked him, what's the key to being a photographer? What does allow you to make a living at this? And I think more than any other technical answer, more than any kind of creative answer, what stuck with me was that he reiterated, he stressed the importance of diversifying yourself. And so he listed 9 different areas where he makes income as a photographer, and they were, assignment work, stock sales, book publishing, speaking gigs, photo workshops, print sales, all writing, all these different avenues. And that stuck with me. And then it really hit home in 2008 when the economy crashed, and I had just moved to Alaska. So I was a new guy in town, in a town that was very much good old boy network place. And everywhere I went, everybody said, "Oh, your work's great, Dan, but we always use so-and-so. He's been shooting him for 20 years. So I was new guy in town in a bad economy. And so I started writing, and I was able to kind of advance. I was able to incorporate the writing into my photography, and I figured, what can I do? I know about photography, so I started writing articles and blogging and that kind of thing. And from that, the social media following evolved, and then I started book publishing, and with my workshop have grown even more out of that. So figuring out how to diversify, no matter what you do with photography, figuring out how to have a number of different avenues and a number of different outlets that can potentially bring you income, because the fact of the matter is there are going to be times when one or more of those avenues slow down or dry up completely. And so to be able to insulate yourself from any one specific crash, and so that's been a real important way for me been a real vital way for me to stay successful throughout this very volatile evolution in the past few years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just quickly, I would echo that as well. It's been really really good to have multiple income streams from lots of different ways of presenting your work, be it selling prints or blogging about it. In your case, selling the ebooks as well. and just being cognizant of the fact that these days, as you say, it's a volatile market out there, and if you rely 100% on purely editorial photography these days, it's definitely a risky game to play. So having these multiple income streams is definitely a good way to do that.
And I think that the with the internet and the social networks, there's such a huge number of different ways that you can get your imagery out there, and different outlets that you can, really creative ways to partner with people, and whether it's doing workshops or writing and doing photo essays for a site, or if you spend enough time just really coming up with ideas and getting yourself out there, you'll come up with like I said, endless number of ideas.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we're running a little bit over time already, but I just want to do one more question that came in on Google Plus there. This is from Mitch Wood, and he says, how do you approach strangers to get their pictures, if you do that, is his question. To be honest, I'll answer quickly myself, because it's going to be a quick answer, and the short answer to Mitch there is that I typically don't do that. It's a lot of travel photographers find themselves in situations where they might want to get some photos of local people, but my type of photography doesn't usually call on that kind of thing. What about you, Dan?
Over the years, I've done a real mix of adventure, assignment work, editorial, and travel photography, and I found that the best thing is just to be yourself. Be your good-natured, honest self, who's confident in your photography. Maybe don't shove the camera in your subject's face right off the bat. Establish a rapport with your subject. Make it clear that you want to take a picture, but to kind of back off your stance and get to know them and interact with them as people, because the reality is that whoever it is that you want to take a picture has an entire life and history behind them, and maybe interacting with them, you can learn something that could eventually make it so you can shoot a better picture. But of course, getting to know them is going to give you a personal interaction, which is going to broaden your depth as a human being anyway on this planet.
Mm-hmm. And especially in a travel situation, it can really add to your overall experience if you learn a few of the stories from people that are out there in the location that you're visiting. So
Totally.
Yeah, I think that's a good question, Mitch, and a lot of people do always have that question. So thanks for sending that in. And I think we're going to have to wrap it up there, Dan, because we're running a little bit over already. But thank you so much for taking the time to hang out with us today. Apologies to those who are watching for the technical difficulties we had at the beginning. We'll definitely make this a smoother process in the future. And Dan, how can people get in touch with you? How can people find you on the internet? And where can people get hold of your books, just to go over that stuff again quickly?
So first of all, I want to say thanks to you, Dan, for setting this up. This is my first Google Hangout, so I wasn't really sure what to expect. So the technical difficulties, I guess, are par for the course. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and to meet you, face to face, as it were. As far as contacting me, I'm on Twitter at Dan Bailey Photo. My Google Plus link is on the page for this event. My website is danbaileyphoto.com. You can get to all my Facebook and my Twitters and my blog from there. My ebooks are all available on my blog. And like I said, the Behind the Action is the brand new one, basically going, looking over my shoulder at how I created 12 outdoor images, and it's on sale for the next 48 hours, 20% off. Discount codes on my site. So.
Okay, perfect. And so if anyone else wants to get hold of me, you guys have probably already found the Google Plus events page, google.com/plus Dan Carr, or you can find me on Twitter at Dan Carr Photo. And if you didn't catch all of this live stream, it will be up on YouTube, so you'll be able to follow a link from the event page or from my Google Plus profile, and I'll share that with Dan as well, so people will be able to watch this chat for eternity, including the little
ever.
yeah, including the difficulty at the beginning, but I might try and edit that bit out if I can.
And if anybody wants to ask me questions, I try to answer everything that people ask me on Twitter. I try to put myself out there as an open person who's willing to share information. as time permits. So feel free to ever ask me anything, if you on Google Plus or Twitter or email or any of those places. So,
okay,
and then
great.
follow me on Facebook as well. So,
perfect. All right. Well, thanks again, Dan, and good luck with your new book. I hope everyone goes and checks that out, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Dan. It's great to meet you, and I hope we get to hook up face to face sometime and come to Alaska.
Yeah, definitely. We'll do that.
Okay,
all
thanks
right.
everybody. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks. Bye.